Warren Buffett says you only need about a 125 IQ to be very successful.
Hi, everybody.
But it's better to
This
stay in your
is
lane.
my
Just
first.
say, I'm not that smart, but you can hire 155 IQ.
This is my first YouTube live, and I'm going to read to you parts of Care for the Soul by Thomas More. He was a former monk for 12 years, and going into 2019, one of my goals was to read more. So, read about 15 minutes a day. So, set my little timer, or there's a timer on here, and I'm just going to read. So, if you have any comments or like what you've heard, click the subscribe button, and here we go. Family has many meanings depending on the context. The sociologist thinks of it as a social group or a construct. The psychologist imagines a fount from which personality flows. The politician talks about the family in an idealized way, using the idea of family to represent his traditional program and values. But we all know the family in its particulars. That is the nest in which soul is born, nurtured and released into life. It has an elaborate history and ancestry and a network of unpredictable personalities, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins. Its stories tell of happy times and tragedies. It has moments of pride and skeletons in its closets. It has its professed values and its careless constructed image, as well as its secret transgressions and follies. It is remarkable how often the family is expressed on two levels: the facade of happiness and normality, and the behind-the-scenes reality of craziness and abuse. I have heard many stories over the years of families that are picture book perfect on the surface: family camping, Sunday dinners, trips, gifts, and play. But beneath it all is the remote father, the hidden alcohol, the abuse of a sister, and midnight violence. Television presents this bifurcation with sitcoms of sweet and successful families followed by news reports of family savagery. Some people believe the image of normality and maintain the secret of their family's corruption, wishing they had been born elsewhere in a land of bliss. But recovery of soul begins when we ask, or we can take to heart our own family fate and find in the raw material the alchemical prima materia for our own soul work. For this purpose, family therapy might take the form of simply telling stories of the family life, free of any concern of cause and effect or sociological influence. These stories generate a grand local personal mythology. The family is to the individual what the origin of the human life are to the race. Its history provides a matrix of images by which a person is saturated all through adult life. What the Greek, Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, and African mythologies are to the society. Its formative mythology. Stories of the family, good and bad, are to the individual. When we talk about family, we are talking about the characteristics and themes that have woven together to form our identities, which are intrinsically textured. We might, excuse me. Sorry about that. There we go. When we talk about family, we are talking about the characteristics and themes that have woven together to form our identities. Identities. Which are intrinsically textured. We might imagine family therapy more as a process of exploring the complexity of our sense of life than of making it simple and intelligible. Care for the soul is not about understanding, figuring out, and making better. Rather, it resuscitates images of family life as an enrichment of identity. To care for the soul of the family, it is necessary to shift from casual thinking to an appreciation of story and character, to allow grandparents and uncles to be transformed into figures of myth, and to watch certain familiar family stories become canonical through repeated telling. We are so affected by the scientific tone in education and in the media that without thinking we have been We have becoming anthropologists and sociologists in our own families. Often, I will ask a parent about the family, and the answer I get is pure psychological or social psychological. My father's a dork, and as a child of an alcoholic, I am prone to, instead of one hears analysis, instead of stories, one hears analysis. The family has been etherized upon the table. Even worse is the social worker or psychologist who begins talking about a parent with a sing-song list of social influences. The subject is a male who was raised in a Judeo-Christian family with a narcissistic mother and a codependent father. The soul of the family evaporates into the thin air of this kind of reduction. It takes extreme diligence and concentration to think differently about the family, to appreciate its shadow as well as its virtue, and simply to allow stories to be told without slipping into interpretations, analysis, and conclusions. Professionals think it is their job to understand and correct the family without allowing themselves to be introduced fully to its genius, its unique, formative spirit. If we are to observe the soul in the family by honoring its stories and by not running away from its shadow, then we might not feel so inescapably determined by the family's influence. Strongly influenced by developmental psychology, we assume that we are ineluctably who we are because of the family in which we grew up. What if we thought of the family less as the determined influence by which we are formed and more the raw material from which we can make a life? In therapy, when I hear a story of the abusing father or uncle, I usually ask for details about this person's life. Is there a story behind his violence? What were other family members, or what were other members of the family doing? What stories do they tell, and what secrets did they harbor? All right, and that's enough for today. I'll be back a little bit later on Point We Think. Good nuggets. One thing I got out of it is this line: to care for the soul of the family, it is necessary to shift from casual thinking to an appreciation of story and their character, to allow grandparents and uncles to be transformed into figures of myth and to which certain familiar stories become. So just allow stories instead of analyzing people. It's one of the many characteristics that I got from it. So if you like this video, click the subscribe button, and I will talk to you soon.